Hello and good day! Welcome back sa inyong lahat. Ngayon pag-uusapan natin ang huling chapter ng inyong research, which is the summary of findings, conclusions, and recommendation. Punta na po tayo sa discussion. Sa unang paragraph na nakikita nyo dito, ito ang tinatawag nating introductory paragraph. Kagaya ng mga naunang pinag-usapan natin, kapag ang laman yan ay isa o dalawang sentences, introductory statement. So, itong paragraph na ito, yung unang paragraph dito sa chapter 5, uulitin natin, sinasabi lang nito kung ano yung ine-expect nyong makita at mabasa dito sa loob ng chapter 5. Kaya siya tinawag na introductory paragraph. So, kung babasahin natin, dapat malaman natin kung ano ang laman nitong chapter na ito. So, this chapter presents the summary and conclusion derived in the conduct of the study, which is to probe the effect ng math talk as an inquiry-based strategy sa pagtuturo ng mathematics sa grade 7 students dito sa school na ito. It provides recommendations also that can be pursued by mathematics teachers. And ulitin ko po pala, naalala ko, I would also again like to give credit and recognition sa owner po ng research na ginagamit natin dito sa ating discussion. So marami pong salamat. So ulitin natin, ang laman po ng paragraph na ito ay introductory statement kung saan sinasabi niya ano yung mga may expect nating makikita sa loob ng chapter na ito. Now, kung isa-summarize nyo, ang makikita dyan is kung ano yung nasa title ng chapter 5. Makikita nyo ano yung findings, ano yung conclusion, ano yung recommendation. And then actually on the second paragraph, you can do away with the second paragraph. Ibig sabihin, with or without the second paragraph, discussing kung sino yung magiging respondents, the first paragraph will already stand and is already sufficient para maging introductory paragraph ng chapter 5. So to continue, after the introductory paragraph, makikita ninyo summary of findings will be the next part of chapter 5. Summary of findings follow a specific pattern or it is patterned after a part ng research ninyo na makikita sa chapter 1. Susundan ninyo yung tinatawag nating SOP. So, as you can see on the introductory statement, the findings of the study were summarized according to the statement of the problem. Ibig sabihin, i-restate niya or itatype niya lang ulit as is kung ano yung SOP. Ito po yung naka-bold. Yan yung SOP na nasa chapter 1. And then immediately after, at the bottom of the statement of the problem or SOP number 1 is the finding of the research or the study. And then if you're going to observe kung paano niya i-present yung findings of the study, ginagamit pa rin nila yung numeric value and yung equivalence ng numeric value taken from chapter 4. So ito, makikita ito sa table 1. So lumabas yung nasa first paragraph doon sa interpretation ng table number 1. So, makikita nyo may mga numeric values silang ginagamit dyan. I am telling you this because pagdating dun sa susunod na part, hindi na lalabas yung mga numeric values na yan. So, again, to reiterate and to emphasize, all of these, yung mga nakabold na number 1, number 2, 2.1, 2.2 dapat yan, are all part of the SOP. So, ni-restate lang yan and then immediately sa ilalim niyan are the findings of the study based on chapter 4 using the numeric values sa interpretation na makikita nyo sa chapter 4. So, in short, all of these findings are based on the evidences na i-present ninyo sa chapter 4. So, hindi po ito haka-haka. Hindi po ito hula. Ito po ay based sa result ng data at ng tabulation at ng statistical analysis na ginawa nyo sa chapter 4. So again, this part of chapter 5 is called the summary of findings and based sa chapter 1, meron siyang 7 SOP. So kung titignan natin dito sa baba, 7 yung SOP niya according to chapter 1. Ito po yung 7. Is there significant difference between the learning gains of the non-math talk and the math talk group? And then immediately after that, conclusion na yung susunod. And we're going to discuss the conclusion later on. Okay, to continue our discussion, the next part of chapter 5 is conclusion. On this part of your research, dapat isulat nyo ito sa present tense. And then, the summary of findings should be written in the past tense. So, ulitin natin, the summary of findings should be written in the past tense and the conclusion should be written in the present tense. So, kung mapapansin ninyo, dito sa conclusion natin, meron siyang introductory statement based on the indicated findings. So, ang conclusion is based on the summary of findings. So, the initial part, yung summary of findings, yun ang magiging basihan para makabuo kayo ng tinatawag nating conclusion. And by definition, conclusions are realizations, and realizations should be based on evidences. At ang ebidensya nyo sa pag-formulate ng conclusion na ito should be based on the summary of findings. So that is the relationship ng conclusion doon sa summary of findings ninyo. So kung makikita ninyo kung ano yung mga conclusions niya dito, these are based on the answers na ibinigay niya sa summary of findings. And then towards the end of the discussion, sa last paragraph, the researcher concluded that students learned more using math talk as an inquiry-based strategy in teaching mathematics. This is very, very important na conclusion, na realization. And you cannot make this na wala kayong basihan. So, ang basis ng pagbibigay niya ng conclusion na ito would be numbers 1 to 4. And ulitin natin, all of these conclusions were summarized into the last paragraph at ito ay nakabase sa summary of findings. And to continue our discussion, the last part of chapter 5 is recommendation. But before we move on to the main discussion kung ano dapat ang laman ng recommendation ninyo, I would like to remind you that there are two elements that you need to consider kapag kayo ay nagsusulat ng recommendation. And these are, number 1, the doer, who will implement, initiate the action that you are recommending. And the second is the action being recommended. Specify anong klaseng recommendation ang ipinapagawa ninyo. So, in the writing of the recommendation, if you're going to look, the first sentence says, or the first paragraph is already, again, an introductory paragraph. So, this just tells the reader ano yung laman o mababasa nila sa mga susunod na parts ng recommendation. So, if we're going to read this study revealed the effectiveness of math as an inquiry-based strategy in teaching mathematics. Thus, the following recommendations were presented. Then, if you are going to observe the recommendations 1, 2, and 3, the researcher used should and must. But you also may include the word may, which is diplomatic in a way, para hindi nyo masyadong ini-impose o ipinipilit yung recommendation ninyo. As compared to should and must, medyo mas malakas ang dating kapag ginamit nyo yung should and must as compared to may, wherein they have an option to do it or not. So we call this modals. So in writing your recommendations, use modals like should, must, and may. And last but not the least, all of your recommendations should be based on the findings. So again, all of your recommendations should be based on the findings and the conclusion. You have to consider what were your conclusion, and then from that, you should formulate or form your recommendations. The findings and the conclusion will guide you on what type of recommendations or what recommendations would you include in this last part of your research. Huwag kayong maglalagay ng recommendation ng walang kinalaman sa SOP, sa findings, sa conclusion ninyo. These are the most common mistakes in writing the last part of your research. Again, the most common mistake is including articles, ideas that are not included in your SOP, summary of findings and conclusion.